Hello, Taurus. You don't need to introduce yourself. As long as you're still sitting there, steadfast and grounded, perhaps a little stubborn, with a gut feeling that something isn't quite solid, I know your soul is longing for a place where you truly belong. Maybe lately something has felt off. Not obvious, not easy to explain in words, but each time you try to settle into a space, the foundation seems to shift just a little. Every time someone makes a grand promise, you hear the quiet creak of something unstable. And whenever you try to build something, it feels like the ground beneath isn't as solid as it appears. No one confirms it, no one mentions it, and of course, no one understands. Because that feeling, tangible yet without visible cracks, comes with no proof. You've wondered before, am I being too rigid? Am I too resistant to change? Am I imagining things again? Taurus, let me say this clearly. You are not imagining. You're not too anything. You're simply living in deep alignment with your soul's most sacred layer. Your intuition is a compass no one sees, yet it faithfully guides you through every shifting terrain. There were times you tried to ignore it, tried to reason away the strange stirrings within you, but always you return to that same knowing. Something isn't stable, and this time you're no longer pretending not to feel it. Not because you want to confront anyone, but because you are exhausted. Exhausted from carrying the weight of an unstable piece, just to be seen as easy to get along with. You've gotten used to building bridges for others, yet staying anyway, just to keep others comfortable. You've listened to words that sounded promising for security, while your soul knew it wasn't true stability. You've kept quiet just to maintain the illusion of peace, but in that silence, it was you who slowly fractured. Taurus, what you're sensing is not wrong. It's simply too subtle for others to notice the slow erosion. You don't need anyone to validate the truth you're touching. Sometimes, truth arrives like a slow landslide through a serene landscape. No one knows where it came from, only that you feel the ground shifting beneath your feet and understand a great change is forming. Silent and invisible, and you're no longer afraid of change. You just don't want to keep pretending you can't feel the tremors rising inside you. So then stay here in this space where every unsteady feeling is welcome, where you don't have to shrink to fit, where you don't need to be practical or convenient, where your need for stability is the truth. Because sometimes the only thing you need to carry on is someone still enough to whisper to you, "I believe you," even before you said a word. And from that first wave of recognition, something else begins to emerge, not from someone far away, but from a presence that's always been nearby. A comforting hand, a steady voice, a presence that once felt harmless. But something about it is no longer as pure as you once believed. Your body knows, your instinct has felt it, and now it's time we speak of it. Dear Taurus, you're beginning to see more clearly now. Not with your eyes, but with the quiet resistance running through your muscles each time they try to hold you steady. A person you've known, gentle, familiar, someone everyone seems to admire, someone who always knows what to say, just stable enough, who always arrives at the right time in the right role. They've never done anything wrong, and yet you've never felt fully at ease in their presence. Sometimes you even blamed yourself. Am I being too rigid? Am I the one feeling unyielding for no reason? But the more you force yourself to think positively, the more your body tightens up every time they're near, because some people don't need to do anything cruel. Just being around them long enough, you begin to feel yourself shrinking, like building a house on sand that pretends not to shift until the true foundation slowly crumbles in silence. Dear Taurus, you've always had a soft spot for those who seemed reliable on the surface. because you've always wanted to believe in the best in them. You wanted to believe those promises were truly solid, that the support was sincere, that the gift had no hidden cost. But the truth is, energy never lies. They might bring you comfort, but still something inside you feels drained, exhausted. They might praise your diligence, but in their gaze, there's a quiet competition, as if they're trying to outbuild you in a race you never signed up for. And you know it. You don't need proof because you're Taurus. You're the one who hears the whisper of an insecure soul even when they say nothing at all. You are the one who can feel the instability in another's intentions even behind their reassuring words. The truth is, what unsettles them isn't your success. It's the way you are, grounded yet abundant, persistent yet growing effortlessly. And most of all, you never need to dim someone else's light to shine. And you know what? That's exactly what bothers them most. Because you're not competing, and still you're respected. You're not seeking the spotlight, and still you're remembered. You're not trying hard, and yet you build empires. You are not like them, and you don't have to be. It's time to stop shrinking your energy to fit someone else's insecurity. You don't need to dim your light just because someone finds it too bright. You don't need to lower your sincerity just because it makes someone uncomfortable. You don't need to pretend to be humble so that someone else can feel superior. Because true humility never comes from hiding. It comes from gratitude. And you, Taurus, have always honored the presence of others without comparison, so now lift your head. Trust that first feeling in your gut. Step out of that slow erosion, that comfort-wrapped suppression. You don't have to make a scene. Just remove yourself silently, gently, like walking out of a field that no longer feels fertile. No need to expose anyone, no need to prove anything. Just be honest with the discomfort in your own body and choose to walk away. Because you deserve to live in spaces where your efforts are welcomed, not dissected, where your energy is embraced, not secretly envied. And you know something strange. The more you step out of those twisted fields, the clearer you see. You had forgotten something deeply important. Something so small, yet powerful enough to change your life. And that's exactly where the story is about to lead you. And then the strangest thing happened. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't a disaster. It was a quiet moment. One day, you simply stopped trying. You stopped needing to explain why someone's presence made you feel ungrounded. You stopped justifying your no's. You stopped apologizing for leaving circles that starved your soul. You no longer forced yourself to make sense of everything. No more exhausting mental loops. Are they thinking, I'm too rigid? Am I overreacting? You just felt and trusted what you felt with quiet clarity. That awakening, it wasn't fire, it was earth. Still persistent, but unstoppable. It seeped into every crack you once patched with comfort, and slowly the thin layers of belief began to peel back, revealing something you never dared to face. You spent too long trying to be accepted in places you were never meant to build upon. Dear Taurus, I know you once thought, if I'm practical enough, patient enough, giving enough, they'll understand. You stayed too long in situations that never yielded true fruit, hoping one day someone would appreciate the effort you had offered. But then you realized, some people aren't lacking kindness. They simply don't have the capacity to appreciate the depth you live in. And that is not your fault. You no longer need to prove anything. You don't need to repeat, I never meant any harm. You don't have to stay just because you're afraid the truth might upset someone. You weren't born to please the world. You came here to live in alignment with both your light and your shadows. And real light isn't always dazzling. It's the kind of light that confuses others because it doesn't blind. It provides a stable ground. And from that moment on, you chose conscious silence. Not because you gave up, but because you understood. Truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be lived. You stood in spaces where you had to shrink your soul just to be loved, where you had to edit your words so they wouldn't be misunderstood, where you had to pull back your resources, afraid they'd be too much for someone else. But not anymore. No more lowering your voice to be easier to swallow, no more forcing a smile to keep someone comfortable who never cared to truly appreciate you. No more avoiding your own depth just to keep a shallow connection. Because, dear Taurus, you don't have to convince anyone to see you. Those with depth will feel you without you having to say a word. And so you begin to live that way, gently walking away from shaky ground without feeling like you've lost a thing. Because you understand now. Silence is a language too, and you're learning to speak it so your soul can breathe, no longer suffocated by the need to be understood. And strangely, it's when you stop trying to prove yourself that everything begins to come into focus. What you once doubted becomes truth. The people you once held so high reveal their true form, and you no longer hurt the way you used to, because pain has turned into clarity, and clarity is the deepest kind of freedom. So don't look back. Don't try to explain the part that was left unfinished. Don't fill the silence with words. You've gone far enough to know some things don't need to be understood, only released. And behind that release, there's a question, not from anyone else, but from within you. A question that can only be heard once your soul is quiet enough. And when you answer it with honesty, every door begins to change its shape. There's something only souls who have truly suffered can understand. Pain is not the end. It is the bell of awakening. It is the whisper of the divine, of God, of Buddha, of the very universe within you saying, it's time to let go of what no longer belongs and to walk through the door you've ignored too many times. Taurus, pain does not make you weak. It only peels back the layers of you that have lived too long without truly being alive. A comfort that once felt sacred, a place you once called home, a dream you once held before you ever knew what pain was. You are not breaking. You are rebuilding. Like an ancient ritual of rebirth, every soul must walk through. You are falling, but falling into the truest part of who you are, the place where you no longer have to be strong, only honest with the emotion knocking at your door. And in the middle of nights when you feel like there is nothing left to hold on to, in the middle of whispered prayers, why me? There is something that has quietly happened. You did not fall apart. You just became still. You simply stopped resisting. And in that moment, God placed a hand over your chest, not to perform a miracle, but to remind you, I am still here. I never left. And in that same moment, Buddha smiled. He said nothing because he knows you don't need answers. You just need space to breathe with your pain instead of running from it. And you breathed, slow, heavy, but honest. And that breath was the first sign you had begun to return. You are coming back to yourself, no longer playing a role, no longer pretending to be okay just to keep things calm, no longer smiling through conversations that leave you hollow, no longer forcing yourself to keep going just because someone else might think you've given up. And you realize, sometimes pain is the strangest gift the universe can offer. It clears away the false layers. It pushes you out of your comfort zone. It shatters every structure you once believed would last forever, only to show you what is eternal never needs to be clung to. Dear Taurus, your steadfastness once wrapped around the world like a sturdy fence, shielding it from the wind, but it was never enough to keep yourself truly safe. And this time, You don't need to hold anyone back. You no longer blame them for leaving. Because now you understand. They didn't betray you. They simply walked away from the version of you that you had already released. This pain then is no longer a punishment. It is a baptism, an inner rain that washes away every falsehood you once mistook for truth. And after the rain, you don't have to say a word. Just stand there as yourself, whole, silent, and deep as earth after a long rain. You may not be ready to smile again. You may still tremble whenever an old memory passes by, but you no longer try to make it disappear because you understand now. Some things don't need to be erased. They only need to be accepted and allowed to pass through like a guest who once stopped by. And in that moment, another part of you, the luminous part, the still part, the eternal part, begins to open its eyes slowly, gently, as if it has been waiting for you to return from some ancient lifetime. And you are still returning, slowly but truly. And what lies ahead is not a continuation. It is a beginning, reborn from a self that has been purified. Can you feel it? A small movement is taking shape within, not loud but clear, and it will guide you to where your soul has always known. Only those who dare to lose themselves truly find themselves again. Sweet Taurus, you once believed that person was sent to you because their first steady glance made your heart feel safe, because their voice felt like a memory you'd never lived but ached to embody, because they showed up exactly when you were vulnerable, when you thought you could never trust anyone again, and you whispered to yourself, "This must be destiny." But then you learned a truth no one had ever taught you, that a spark does not mean you belong, and connection is not always the universe's invitation. Sometimes it is only the echo of a wound that hasn't healed. Dear Taurus, you can feel a soul touch yours through a firm handshake. You can feel your heart soften from the gentlest gesture. But that doesn't mean you must give them your whole world. Not everyone who makes you feel secure was meant to stay. Not everyone who finds your tender places knows how to hold them with care. You once mistook that, and you were not wrong. You just loved with a heart that knew no fences. You gave with a soul that had never learned how to keep anything for itself. You loved like fertile earth, giving and sustaining. But now, after everything, you're beginning to understand that love is not the feeling that arrives first. True love is what remains after the storm of emotions has passed. That person once made you believe that loving was enough. You once sat for hours trying to interpret the way they invested in you. You listened to their silences as if they held the secret code to your fate. But now you know, love does not need to be decoded. It needs to be lived. And true love never makes you doubt yourself. True love doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't ask you to dim your light. It doesn't leave you lost between wanting to stay close and fearing you'll be left behind. You once accepted love like that because you thought, maybe I'm too much. Maybe I need to wait a little longer. Maybe if I cultivate them enough, they'll learn how to cultivate me. But now you're no longer waiting. Not because you've stopped believing in love, but because you've started believing more in yourself. And what you've come to understand is this: true destiny never asks you to fold yourself up in order to be kept. True destiny unfolds you, it makes you more real, more free, and it never makes you question your worth. No, you are not colder. You are simply more awake. You are not harder to love. You've simply stopped surrendering to connections that lead nowhere. And for the first time, you've learned to stay with yourself, even when your heart longs to run toward them. You know it isn't easy, but you know even more deeply A soul in healing no longer chases doors that will never open for her. And if someone is truly meant for you, they won't make you guess. They won't play with that fragile thread between hope and doubt. They will arrive with clarity in their gaze, with presence that speaks without noise, with a heart that no longer hides. Dear Taurus, don't believe that just because you feel someone so deeply they must stay. It doesn't work that way. To feel does not mean to hold. To understand does not mean you must walk beside. You may love many in this lifetime, but only the love you give yourself will teach you who truly deserves to stand in that light. And you're learning that now, day by day, each heartbeat a little less heavy, each memory no longer drowning you in tears. And from that quiet, a new energy is forming, not to make you fall, but to guide you home to a love that no longer wounds. Can you feel it? Someone is coming. Not loud, not the kind that makes you tremble with longing, but the kind that brings peace to the very parts of you that once begged to be seen. And from that peace, a new layer unfolds. No longer about choosing who to love, but choosing yourself first without needing permission. You used to think placing yourself first was wrong, selfish, cold, lacking compassion, because since you were young, you were taught good people give way, give up the seat, give up your voice, give up your needs, give up your truth, so others could feel comfortable. And so you gave, until one day, you didn't even know what your own needs were anymore. You once thought, if I love someone deeply, it's okay to step back a little. As long as they're happy, that's enough for me. And you lived like that for years, with a heart stretched far beyond its capacity. Dear Taurus, how many times did you stay silent when they were careless? How many times did you smile while your resources were depleted? How many times did you heal others with hands still bleeding? And then, did anyone stay? Not everyone left, but enough did for you to realize one thing. Love cannot save someone if it's breaking you in the process. And then one day, you just couldn't take it anymore. Not because anyone did something too cruel, but because you felt yourself slowly dying inside, and no one noticed. And for the first time, you did the one thing you thought was wrong. You chose yourself. You chose not to text first, not to explain, not to hold on to half-hearted connections, not to excuse someone you knew no longer deserved your sacred energy. You chose silence, not to punish, but to protect the peace that had just begun to flicker inside you. And you know what happened? You didn't die because of it. You didn't lose everything like you feared. On the contrary, you began to feel alive again, because finally you no longer had to bend yourself into shape just to love someone the right way. You only had to love yourself in the right way, at the right time, and deep enough to matter. Dear Taurus, choosing yourself is not selfish. It is a sacred seed of karma you are planting into the fertile soil of your soul's life. When you sit with your tired body, gently hold its trembling form and whisper, "From now on, we don't have to sacrifice anymore." That is not an ending. It is a ritual of the opening of a new chapter where you no longer give to be seen. You give because you are full. You keep because you know you are worthy. You step back not from coldness, but because at last you have learned how to stay with yourself. And do you know something? When you choose yourself completely, the universe will send souls who don't need you to save. They only need you to be present. And then there comes a moment when you stop looking back, not because you forced yourself to let go, but because you realize there's simply nothing left to hold on to. The ones who once kept you awake with regret no longer reach into your soul the way they used to. The words that once shattered you now drift past you like wind brushing across a mountain. You no longer feel anger, nor do you forgive out of duty or pressure to let go. You simply don't need it anymore. You don't need an apology. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to be seen, because you have seen yourself. And that is when you are truly born again. Not with noise, not beneath the spotlight, but simply you, standing quietly in front of a mirror, smiling at the eyes that finally learned not to look away. No applause, no one writing about you online, no one rushing to hug you at the end of some big transformation, but you know with quiet certainty something inside you has changed forever. You are no longer the person who used to whisper, "What should I do to make them come back?" Now you ask, "What must I do to never return to the old version of myself?" And that is the quietest rebirth, but also the most irreversible. You are no longer the one who's always ready to love someone more than yourself. No longer the one who sends long messages and gets a single emoji in return. No longer the one who sits in silence while breaking inside. Now you speak when there's truth to say, you stay silent when it's not worth your energy, and you walk away when there's nothing left worth staying for. You no longer play the role of the good one. You no longer try to rescue anyone, because now you know. Real kindness is not about convincing people to stay. It's about not keeping anyone if it costs you your soul to do so. Dear Taurus, this is you. After everything, after the sleepless nights, after the days of being misunderstood, after all the times you chose others over yourself, now you choose you, not to prove your strength, but to be honest with the steadfastness in you that was once trampled upon. You will love again, more deeply, more slowly, but you will never again ask anyone to unground you, because you understand, those who are real will never fear the depth of your roots. They'll know how to build with you in your world. And if today you are quietly walking through pain, if you are choosing yourself in a world that demands sacrifice, if you are awakening without applause, then know this: you are not alone. You are exactly where your soul was meant to be. You are living your life, not borrowing someone else's role, not waiting for permission, not repeating the old story. And that, dear Taurus, is the deepest kind of freedom. Thank you for staying with this message until the very end. Thank you for having the courage to feel every layer of your emotions instead of rushing past them. Thank you for not abandoning yourself one more time. May you have enough stillness to hear your soul's whisper, enough clarity to not fall into old patterns, and enough light to meet yourself again in a version that is deeper, more peaceful, and more radiant than ever before.